The 80s has been a decade of hard times on Minnesota's farms.
And last year's drought off to benefit from it. During the early part of the decade, crops were good, but prices were so low that it cost more to harvest it than to sell it.
Because of hard times on the farm, Minnesota's small towns have hurt too. Stores have closed, schools consolidated, and people have moved away.
In our series, The State of Small Towns, News 11's Ken Speak and photographer Paul Robelstadt visited small towns across Minnesota. Ken and Paul take us from the Twin Cities to rural Itasca County. Despite the hard times, they found folks optimistic, looking forward to the future.
Slow traffic up from the south 35W northbound, up from the Burnsville Parkway to the Minnesota River Bridge.
When the traffic grinds down, and the pavement heats up and things get really frustrating, that's when folks begin thinking about this, the peace and the quiet of the rivers and lakes, the rat race relief that a small town offers.
I got tired, really, of driving 600 miles to go fishing and hunting.
You really can't pick your friends because you're friends with everyone in a small area. So, I like that.
You know all the gossip. What you don't know, you make up, of course.
We go away, we don't worry too much about our home or anything. Just mention to the neighbor we're going to be gone a couple days or something, and if there's a strange car that drives in the yard, he's over there to see what's going on, and that's what I like about it.
Yep, folks who live in small towns like it generally, even though small towns have had considerable difficulty the early part of this decade. You see, most small towns offer services and products to farmers. And with the hard times on the farm have come hard times on small town Main Street. And with the hard times have come changes. Among the most dramatic changes is one that occurred in Cohasset in Itasca County. Cohasset isn't there anymore. Oh, the signs there on the railroad, and the stores and the homes that used to be Cohasset are still there, but it's all part of Bass Brook Township these days. The city of Cohasset was dissolved in 1975.
The city government at that time, they didn't have a tax base to provide the services to the community.
Diana Skelly was mayor of Cohasset in 1975.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passed.
These days, she shepherds the Bass Brook Township Board of Supervisors through its bi-monthly meetings. She is town clerk, but she remembers the change failed a referendum in 1974, but won handily in 1975.
It passed by a substantial, I think it was by a 2-to-1 margin, that the second time around. Since that time, everything that we have hoped for that would happen has happened.
Among the best of those things is a dramatic drop in people's property taxes provided by the Clay Boswell million-kilowatt electrical generating station. Of course, the folks who do the fishing and the hunting might suggest the tax reduction was just an extra benefit, something that makes living in a small town even a little bit more special. Ken Speak, News 11, Bass Brook Township.
The lack of jobs is generally the biggest problem in Minnesota's small towns, but in tomorrow's report, we'll see about a town that has jobs and scenery in the Root River Valley of southeastern Minnesota.
And up next is sports. The up-and-coming Minnesota tennis pro takes it to the court in his home state.
And finally, the crack of Twins bats could be heard in the Metrodome,
along with a little more humidity.
In tonight's News 11 Extra, Minnesota's small towns are particularly sensitive to the ups and downs of agriculture.
When farmers make money, they spend much of it in small towns. When farmers don't, they don't spend any at all. Despite that, there are towns which have enjoyed a more stable economy.
In the second part of the series, the state of Minnesota's small towns, Ken Speak and photographer Paul Robelstadt take us to Rushford.
It's unusual to see the morning mist move over most Minnesota fields. Not here in Houston County, though. Here in the valleys, coulees they call them, between the 600-foot-tall bluffs, the fog is common, almost as common as it is to see 82-year-old Carl Benke walk to his mailbox to pick up his morning copy of the Winona Daily News. Benke retired in Rushford, partly because it's an agricultural town, though it may not look like it from up here. But like most Minnesota towns, Rushford grew because of farming. It was wheat, as much as anything, that caused the railroad to come through here in 1867. And the town grew like wildfire, had a population of 2,000 at one time. But things change. These days, the railroad is gone. In its place, a bicycle trail. And while agriculture is still important to town, Al Morgan figures tourism will cause future growth.
This is something that'll be here forever, and we already have found the need for bed and breakfasts and motels.
Al Morgan makes sure the restrooms are clean every morning, that the restored railroad depot is open for cyclists to use. He's president of the Rushford Area Historical Society, which restored the depot, partly to serve as a trailhead for the east end of the Root River State Trail. And he's excited.
It's going to bring people to our town, and they're going to spend money, and they're going to, in time, we'll have places for them to stay so they can branch out and do other things while they're here.
But Larry Nielsen isn't so sure. He refills propane tanks for folks at the mobile station he's owned here for 22 years. For the past 12 years, he's offered canoes for use on the nearby Root River, and now he's added bikes for rent. He figures that in a small town, business people must be especially ready to change with the times. He's as excited as anybody about the bike trail, but
that there's only a certain percentage of the business places, for instance, the business will improve from it. I don't see much improvement maybe in a clothing store or the hardware store.
But while folks differ about the amount of money the bike trail and this wonderful Root River will bring to Rushford, they do agree that it's a wonderful place to live, partly because of the scenery, but as much because of the industry in town. Rush Products, for example, builds electrical switches for cars and trucks, employs some 550 people, the biggest employer in Rushford. It and other manufacturers give Rushford a stable, bright future. Yet as much as folks might enjoy living here, things aren't all rosy. Remember Carl Benke, retired Carl Benke, who built himself a $90,000 house in Rushford? Though he's 82 years old, these days he carpenters for a living because he feels stuck.
Right now, I got a house. I can't sell it, and the way the expenses are, I got to keep it working to keep it going.
It's not unusual for small town houses to sell for less than their owners paid for them. But most folks in small towns realize these days that's one of the problems they must face to enjoy their way of life. Ken Speak, News 11, Rushford.
Tomorrow, our series on Minnesota small towns heads northwest to a town with a population of 34, which calls itself the restaurant capital of the world.
And next in sports, Greg. Tonight on News 11 Extra, we take a look at another small town in Minnesota.
It's typical for residents who live in small towns to have lots of pride in them, but few towns have as much pride as the one we feature tonight.
Dorset boasts a population of 34 people and calls itself the restaurant capital of the world. Tonight, Ken Speak has the third report in our series on the state of Minnesota's small towns.
It's a quiet town, real quiet during much of the day. Even though the Heartland Bicycle Trail is bringing a few more folks to town, it's so quiet that the main street of Dorset, Minnesota looks a little like a tidy, well-painted ghost town. But that very quiet has given Dorset some publicity. Woodstock North there used to be a bank. It put Dorset in the Guinness Book of World Records as the smallest town in the world with an operating bank. And the Dorset Cafe, it used to be built right on the street until a car went through the front window, and then they rebuilt it 50 feet back. One for you. Water. Bob Price bought the Dorset Cafe 10 years ago. Says he grew up in the country, calls himself a country boy. And so does Dan Pence, one of the folks waiting for a table at Bob's restaurant. But Dan Pence admits to having come to the country years ago from Chicago. Says he got tired of driving 600 miles to go hunting and fishing.
How would you like to have to wait in a intersection to go through a red light for 5 minutes every day of your life? God forbid you don't do that. I wouldn't want to do it anymore. I've done it a long time. Not anymore.
Sometimes it takes the experience of city life to appreciate what a small town offers. Then again, folks who've grown up in a small town can see the attraction of the city. Denise Hafner recently opened the Schoolhouse Bed and Breakfast. She learned to make beds, got paid a dime for a single, a quarter for a double at her parents' resort. She says her sisters couldn't wait to grow up and leave, but she's always enjoyed living in a small town, though she sees the problems involved.
Oh, I think it's harder for people to make a living. I think that's why people, when they graduate, they do move out of town, because there are very few young couples here that, unless they have a family business, can make a go of it.
Yet Dorset seems to be thriving, partly because it pokes fun at its smallness. Last year, for example, it boasted a population of 34 people and 5 businesses, Bob's Boat Business down at the south end of town, and 4 restaurants. Through the Dorset Daily Bugle, they figure 4 restaurants gives them 1 restaurant for every 8.5 people. Because of that, they call Dorset restaurant capital of the world. But this year, besides the schoolhouse bed and breakfast, there's the new general store and the bicycle rental place, besides the popular Dorset telephone company and post office. So the folks in Dorset enjoy their tongue-in-cheek ribbing, and they enjoy the lifestyle that living in a small town provides. Ken Speak, News 11, Dorset.
Tomorrow night, Ken takes us to one of only 2 counties in Minnesota that have no industry, no factories making anything. They depend entirely on agriculture.
Coming up next.
The taste of bite-sized Ritz Bits and real peanut butter have come together in tiny new Ritz Bits peanut.